And this brings us to our Q&A section. I've noticed that a number of questions have been submitted. Several of you have found the Q&A tab located on the bottom of your screen, and I believe we have at least one hand that's been raised. However, if you were to submit your question by utilizing the Q&A tab, we will call on participants to either ask their questions, or if you prefer us to ask your question on your behalf, we'll be glad to do so. When selected, you'll be asked to unmute yourself and ask your question. Let's see, a panelist will respond to your question directly, or a response will be provided at a later time. So with that, let's see, we've got Miss Morgan Owens. If you are interested in asking your question, who would be so kind as to...
Megan Owens, George.
Yes, Megan Owens. Let's see. And I am not seeing her in the attendees list.
George, the people are putting their questions in the chat. And
Okay.
so Megan has asked how many of the white ghost buildings in the images actually exist and are definitively being built. Love the idea of paving over some of those parking lots, but this seems optimistic.
So who on our panel would like to take that question?
Yeah, I'll start,
Go ahead.
George. Please, Eric, you can continue. I was just going to say that the drawings themselves are certainly visions of a future, or the future that does imagine not only these caps, but some of the additional development that's happening. I will say a lot of the development that's ghosted in on some of those drawings does represent things like the plans for the University of Michigan Center for Innovation and other developments associated with the District of Detroit. So I'm not going to say all of them are definite, but I think a number of them do represent real plans.
Yeah, Jeremy, I was just going to say that, obviously the plans are aspirational. We have a number of people on this call, including MDOT and the city, that are, partners and participating in not only the infrastructure aspects of this project, but also the broader community and built environment. So, but it's a good question, Megan. I think we can look to in future presentations and illustrations, try and define those that are actually real, existing and or under construction, versus those that are potentially anticipated.
The next question is from an anonymous attendee. If the caps are for the benefit of residents and a first benefit noted is shielding people from highway noise, why is the only area along the corridor that actually has residents left open, that being Woodward and Brush? Instead, it creates a funnel for all of the noise and exhaust to the current residents.
I'll take a shot at that one as well, and anybody else, please feel free to weigh in. I think we're envisioning a future where there is a lot of development in and around this entire area, and we tried to kind of space these out so that it would spread the benefits of the caps. That said, the specific boundaries of these caps is something that we're going to be exploring in this phase, and we'd love to continue kind of engaging around exactly how those get designed, and also other treatments that could be done to kind of shield some of the impacts that you guys are talking about here in the questions.
Yeah, I think to just follow up on that. So there are coming out of the concept design, this idea of kind of three smaller caps came out as the preferred alternative that would knit together the different parts of this corridor. So the East Cap is really intended to benefit the Rush Park and the stadiums. The Woodward is the most sort of central cap and kind of the hub of the entertainment district, while that West Cap is intended to kind of reconnect Cass Technical High School and the future University of Michigan Center for Innovation. Um, One of the limitations that we discovered during that concept design was that while it would be incredible to be able to cap this whole area, because of the cost and technical challenges of being able to cap longer spans, the need for mechanical ventilation, ultimately the need to be able to reconstruct the entire I-75 trunk line, the smaller three cap concept came out as the preferred alternative, just because it was more technically feasible from an engineering standpoint. But to Jeremy's point, as part of the feasibility study, I think we do have the ability to really locate where those three caps are relative to the feedback that we're receiving from the community, from Brush Park residents. So I think that, again, that's where your feedback is really important to help us really find the most appropriate locations for those as part of the feasibility study.
All right. And the next question we have is from Cornell Mitchell. And Mr. Mitchell, would you like to ask your question directly? If not, we can read it for you. Let's see. Mr. Mitchell, you're allowed to unmute and ask your question.
You can can why in the bar a cap you not bar Eastern Market area on Fisher Freeway?
Yeah, I can take that one. So really there are the I-75 Cap project is really focused on that area to the north of the downtown between the Lodge Freeway and I-75 where it sort of bends around. There is another project that Jeremy referenced earlier, the I-375 project that many of you, if not most of you, are aware of, that addresses what's called the Gratiot Connector. So that's the portion of I-75 that extends off to the east to connect I-75 back to Eastern Market. So there are, as part of the I-375 project, thoughts about how to kind of reconnect that area of the freeway to Eastern Market, but the I-75 Cap project, at least within this downtown portion, is really focused on that area between 3rd Avenue and Brush Street.
All right, next we have another comment and question from Megan Owens. Lovely vision, great ideas, especially the trees, park space, and protecting bike lanes. But as Ms. Fox alluded, the main question is how much will it cost, plus who will pay for it? And would this compete against other projects like replacing I-375 or rehabbing Michigan Avenue or Gratiot?
I'll also take a stab at this one. So one of the key outcomes of the feasibility study is to really get a more accurate picture of what the cost of this project is and breaking it down almost cap by cap in terms of what that will be. These large infrastructure projects, they tend to be a mix of federal, state, local, and private sector funding to make them successful. So I think that exact mix of both public and private sector dollars will be a key outcome of this phase, but I don't think we're yet ready to kind of put, or we're not able to put a very accurate price tag on what the overall cost of the project will be, but that will be one of the outcomes of the feasibility study.
And next we have Mr. Stephen Enos. Mr. Enos, I will give you permission to speak and you can ask your question. Please unmute. It's currently muted, however. And the question is, as your graphic showed, noise while crossing the highway was a frequent complaint, but the only noise mitigation noted in the proposals were trees, which are quite ineffective for blocking noise. While a wide, flat area will push the noise source further away, it will still be loud. What is the program's position on walls at the edge of the caps, on bridges without caps, and on the highway side of the service drive?
Yeah, that's a good question and something that we do intend to get more detail into on the technical studies that we're doing during this phase. We've heard that noise is one of the primary things, and we do think the caps themselves will have noise, but the question is how we can design those to be spaces and to maximize the noise benefits that can accrue to the adjacent areas of I-75 there. So that is a question we intend to have some additional technical answers to during this phase. But it's correct that, the trees by themselves wouldn't necessarily, they provide some visual shielding and perhaps some noise benefit, but especially in the winter and other times, that's not necessarily their primary purpose. So we will study that, and we will have better information at the conclusion of this study.
All right, next, we have two questions from Carmen, who has not raised her hand, so I'll read the questions. Grand River and off on ramps at 2375, will this change? And then secondly, is there money available for this project since 375 is most likely not to occur?
Jeremy, do you want to take the first one in regard to the off and on ramps?
Yeah, I think, there are a couple of on and off ramps within the 75 footprint here. One off ramp at Second or Grand River, and one on ramp there at Clifford, just west of Woodward. We are, actively trying to figure out how to design around those assets and preserve freeway access. That's another thing that we're going to look at as part of the mobility and access planning for this. But I think to answer, just kind of start the answer to the other question, James, this project is a separate initiative from 375, and the funding that may be available for that project and the status of that project doesn't necessarily have a direct relationship at this point to these projects that we're talking about here today.
All right, next we have a question that was submitted by Peter M. Peter does have his hand raised, so we'll grant permissions to talk. Peter, if you could unmute.
Okay. Given that there's a tremendous amount of redevelopment and destruction that has taken place over the last 60 years in this downtown area that we're talking about, who originally decided that reconnecting the communities that have been gone for 60 years was really a good idea?
Yeah, I can take that one. There are vibrant communities there today. Both the Brush Park community has a long history. It's growing. The number of destinations and assets within this corridor is just really incredible, between the stadiums, the churches, Cass Technical High School, the future University of Michigan Center for Innovation. It's one of our most populated and well-used portions of downtown. And as you sort of walk it, experience it, whether you're going to an event or you're a resident who's crossing the freeway day to day, it has a major impact on quality of life. And I think and really to go back to the kind of District Detroit neighborhood or community benefits agreement and what we heard as part of the Neighborhood Advisory Council there, being able to cap and mitigate some of that noise pollution, some of that air pollution from the freeway was the number one priority of the residents and the people who live there today. So it has incredible benefit, I think, for residents, for business, for the stadiums and entertainment districts. And I think it's really an important project for downtown Detroit.
All right, we have 10 open questions at this time. Next question is from Jim Ross. How can someone or an organization support youth voice efforts in this project? And I can take that from a community engagement standpoint. Again, as was just indicated, we have ongoing partnerships with the Cass Technical High School, which is a large concentration of youth within this area, which would predominantly be utilizing the Western Cap. Last year, we had a number of workshops and sessions with the youth in which they did visioning sessions, which contributed a lot to the placement as well as proposed amenities for the CAP, and looking to continue to grow with that outreach and those opportunities.
Yeah, if I could just maybe add to that, George, for Jim Ross, certainly if there are other groups that you would like to make this team aware of, for specific additional means of engagement beyond things like the conversation that we're having today, we would greatly welcome that. I know that there are ways to communicate through the DDP website, as well as other means that are kind of captured here in today's presentation and will be made available afterwards. But yes, we would welcome any suggestions that you have or introductions you'd like to make, or individuals that you'd like to recommend to participate in the community engagement process. Thank you for that.
Next, we have a question from Adam Cook, who I will promote and allow to unmute and ask his question. Mr. Cook? Mr. Cook is not unmuting. However, we do have this question available. So wondering if this is the appropriate time, but I'm wondering if the large cap spans 3 blocks. So it says Woodall Rogers Freeway was considered yet in this design. It is in Uptown Dallas. The reason I ask is that I lived in Dallas for 4 years in that area. The cap and the park was decent, but there was a fair amount of dust, resumption from the freeway below. So much so that the park was less attractive to area residents and most utilized by the large restaurant built on top of it. These proposed caps are shorter and face east to west, so I'm concerned about the dust. But let's see, that hole can often, pardon me, that could often create a dust bowl or windy summer days.
Yeah, I can take a first shot at that, George. I think in terms of the larger caps, we have talked about how that was looked at in the previous phase, and there's challenges in this corridor. We're familiar with that Clyde Warren Park in Dallas. They have it's a much newer freeway with a much taller profile. The one that we're dealing with here has a much shorter bridge span beneath it, and so there's not as much room to have ventilation systems and other types of things that you would need to have that long of a park. And so that kind of fed into the strategy of having three smaller sized parks as well in this area. As to the dust, I don't know that these caps can mitigate every aspect of the freeway that still will be there. I think we're going to try to maximize that to the extent possible and do some technical studies to help with that. I don't know that there are some similarly scaled and sized caps in in Michigan, in Oak Park, Michigan, where 696 goes through today. I don't know that we've heard that the dust issues have been as present in that location. That's something we can kind of look into, but I do wonder if there's a little bit of a different set of climate challenges that we have here versus in Dallas. Here, I think a primary consideration is going to be management of the water, the storm water that does kind of fall within the state of Michigan. So yeah, we will. It's a good comment and something that we can look into.
The next question we have is from Ingrid's iPad on what are possible funding sources?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions in the chat, George, about funding and whether there's possibilities. I do think, this is a segment of the interstate freeway system. I do think that we are looking at funding sources, including transportation dollars and economic development dollars that could be used on infrastructure projects such as this. And we have a few, targets that we can look for there. I think there are some other precedent projects as well that provide models from other cities who have built these types of strategically located caps that we can kind of see the types of funding mix that they had. But I think it's going to be some mix of potentially federal, state, and maybe even some private types of institutional investments as well to help this that we'd be looking at trying to assemble.
All right, the next question we have is from Joseph Binkowski. Are there plans to include public restroom buildings located on the caps? I know it's very early in the process, but these areas could fill a big need downtown. Also, how much of this plan, if any, has to be coordinated with the Ilitch family? Only asking because they own a lot of land surrounding I-75 between Woodward and Cass.
Do you want to take the first part of that and I'll take the second one, Jeremy?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Yeah, restrooms and amenities is one of the things that we definitely heard a lot about during the first phase, and I think we'll be looking at ways to do that. I think one of the challenges, just looking at the technical and engineering considerations for the caps themselves will be how many kind of utilities and other types of things that you'd support on these caps, but we have recognized it as a need and something that we can try to be creative in terms of working into the design, especially if the community's looking for those for it to be a useful space.
And then in regards to the Ilitch family and Olympia development, I mean, the idea for the caps themselves really came out of the community benefits process through the District of Detroit and has sort of a long history there. It's certainly supported by Olympia development and really many of the stakeholders throughout this corridor. In terms of coordination, I mean, clearly they're impacted by this, and we will continue to have conversations with Olympia development and see how it impacts things like Little Caesars Arena and the development around it. So they are kind of one of many key stakeholders to the project moving forward.
All right, the next question we have again is from Carmen. Did the failed design in Oak Park's caps help to hinder or your drainage design plan, and what was learned?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. I think Carmen's referring to the Oak Park, the caps over 696 in Oak Park, which have been in the news. MDOT has needed to now rebuild one of those caps because of water infiltrating and getting through, and then icicles forming beneath. And so, yeah, that's an experience and a situation that they don't want to, or we don't want to relive or perpetuate in these caps. So that 696 cap, one of them is being rebuilt now with a different design that we think is going to be more effective, or that MDOT thinks is going to be more effective in managing the stormwater on that, and we'll take a similar approach, and definitely that would be something that would be baked into the design of these caps, need to be baked into the design.
And the final question we have for this evening is, will there be additional parking allocated for this project? Parking has been a huge issue in Brush Park community.
I'll just say that I don't think the caps themselves will be targeted for use as parking. I think, there are surrounding areas and parking assets. I think we'll take that into account in terms of how people will access the caps themselves. But I don't think that the caps are being built or created to kind of resolve the parking issues that kind of exist off the caps and around in the surrounding neighborhoods. So that would be my thought on that one.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. We are looking at the local street network as part of the feasibility study. So looking at the service drives, looking at how some of the local streets kind of connect back to the caps. And I do think as part of that effort of looking at the local streets, that there could be some opportunity to add some things like on-street parking immediately adjacent. So I think in that respect, we can start to address some of the parking issue, but it's a good question, and we'll be working closely with the city of Detroit on being able to sort of figure out some of the parking solutions that come along with a major infrastructure and public space project like this.
And that concludes our written and submitted questions.
Thanks, George. I just want to acknowledge that I think earlier in the presentation we did share a QR code. It looks like that QR code has expired. So sorry about that. I do think that it's still an option, and we still do want to hear from people and hear stories. We did share an email that can be used, and that is a valid email address there, the road ahead at downtowndetroit.org. And then as we post the presentation for this onto the DDP website that we've given, we will update that QR code. It will take you and put a link there for you to follow and correct that. So apologies for that, but we do want to hear those stories, and we do have that physical data collection form. And we will continue to do that throughout the course of this entire feasibility study effort.
And really, we encourage you to sign up for that Road Ahead email communication that we send out updates not only the I-75 project, but the I-375 project through that email address. So it's a two-way street. You can send us your stories of the I-75 cap and your comments on the project, and we'll also be distributing project updates through that road ahead at downtowndetroit.org email address. So please be on the lookout for that. We'll also be sending a summary of tonight's public meeting along with the questions that you've asked. And so we really just encourage all of you to stay engaged with the project over the course of the next year of the feasibility study. We will be coming back to you in January with the next public meeting. We're going to do that one in person. It's going to be a little bit more interactive, and it's going to allow you to really weigh in on the design of these public spaces. We'll also have a little bit more information to share about the sort of sizing and location of the caps. So that'll be an important update, and we hope that you're all able to attend that. Is there anything more from the team before we hang up? Well, thank you all so much. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming out. We really appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch over the course of the next year. Thanks, everyone.